We came in.
I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is Pink Floyd The Wall the greatest movie ever made?
Poems, no less. Poems, everybody! The laddie reckons himself a poet.
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
If you don't eat your meat, how can you have any pudding?
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and enjoyable and compelling, I messed it up. It's the only thing that matters in the world.
Entertaining and compelling. A film so entertaining and compelling, that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world.
Yeah.
I believe is what you usually say.
That's what I usually say when I'm not fucking stupid. I'm David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host and man who fills me with the urge to defecate, Justus Burkett.
Yeah. Yes. Fills me with the urge to defecate is just a very funny, even before, because this was the first time I had seen this movie, but I have listened to the Pink Floyd album, The Wall, several times. And every time on the trial that line happens, I'm just always like, man, what a funny line. Roger Waters, not my favorite member of Pink Floyd. And I don't think that's necessarily a controversial opinion. Like, a lot of people, Roger Waters fans, a lot of people, Roger Waters skeptics. I fall somewhere in the middle. I feel like that's pretty normal. But gotta hand it to him. The guy can write lyrics and fills me with the way you've made them suffer, your exquisite wife and mother, fills me with the urge to defecate is an all-timer. Well, so good job. Credit where credit is due.
There's a sound clip on the album that isn't in the version of the movie.
Shit on him, Judge!
Yeah. Which I didn't realize was like what that said until I saw the live show. And that text appeared on the wall. So that's very good. Are you a Gilmore head?
I love David Gilmour, yes. I think David Gilmour's voice, for me, is a lot more pleasant to the ear than Roger Waters. I really just love listening to David Gilmour sing. And, his guitar work has always been amazing and masterful to me. And he seems a little bit more grounded and like he does the shit for the love of the music more than Roger Waters, who is always trying to say something. And I like the stuff that Roger Waters says 85% of the time. And then 15% of the time, I'm like, okay, Roger, you can stop jerking yourself off in front of all of us. which that will lead into our conversation about the Pink Floyd album, The Wall, and also this film, is I love it. It's heady. I love the concepts, and I love all the stuff that it delves into. And also, every once in a while, much like a lot of Roger Waters' forward creative efforts, I find it to be occasionally a little bit masturbatory. Which I don't think is unfair to say.
No, I mean, I think a big criticism people have both of the album and the film is just it's not a Pink Floyd album, it's a Roger Waters album.
Right.
And I think that applies doubly to the follow-up album to this, The Final Cut,
yes,
which is basically a Roger Waters solo album.
Yeah.
You barely feel David Gilmour or Rick Wright's presence on that.
Yeah. How are you doing, David?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Had a good close of the show. I'm feeling good. In the media, I have to recommend. I watched Terrence Malick's debut film Badlands today, which is based loosely based on Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate.
Oh yes.
Good fucking movie.
Yeah.
Young Martin Sheen,
cool.
Young Sissy Spacek.
I've never seen it, but
it's pretty rad. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. My week is off to kind of a lazy, slow start, but I'm chilling. I don't really have any media to recommend because we've been closing a show, and I had to unexpectedly go on stage in my own play and stuff. So I haven't really been consuming a lot of new media since our last record.
Which you did a great job at.
Thank you. But but I'm good. I'm chilling. That's pretty much all I have to say. Actually, I guess for my media recommendation, it would be the Pink Floyd album Dark Side of the Moon, which is my favorite Pink Floyd album.
Fucking normie.
I'm a normie. Fucking sue me. One of the greatest albums of all time is my favorite Pink Floyd album.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. I got a fucking media recommendation for you. You kids and your Rapple Chones and your William Eilishes. How about the music of Pink Floyd?
How about the musical stylings of Roger Waters and David Gilmour and Rick Wright and the drummer whose name I don't remember?
Nick Mason.
Nick Mason.
It's okay. Nick can keep a 4/4 time, and that's about it.
To Nick Mason.
He's the prog rock Ringo Starr, and we love him anyways.
And Syd Barrett. I listened to Piper at the Gates of Dawn for the first time all the way through.
Oh, okay.
Relatively recently, knowing that we would do this episode, and I was like, oh yeah, Syd Barrett was a genius. Like listening to that album, I'm just like, oh shit, he really like all the lore that you hear about him from the latter years of Pink Floyd, and like how much Gilmour and Waters kind of like revered him and also felt really bad for his whole mental decline and stuff. It's like when you listen to Piper at the Gates of Dawn, you're like, oh shit, like this guy really had it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was like an actual creative genius. So that was fun to listen to that for the first time too, just because I wanted like more context going into this. I'm not a Pink Floyd completist. I haven't listened to every single album, but like I haven't listened to the post Waters stuff. But for a while I was the Wall head. And then when I started doing my political science minor in college, Animals was my favorite Pink Floyd album. And pretty much ever since like leaving college, it's been Dark Side of the Moon for me. Mm-hmm. Just because I'm like, it's the one that's most universal to me. It's also the best for me musically because The Wall is big and handles a lot of like big themes and goes in a lot of really interesting directions musically, but it's not as like focused, and it doesn't work as well for me as like a complete composition, as because it feels a little bit more fractured than Dark Side of the Moon, which feels like it's like a symphony sort of, mm-hmm. right? And I don't know, I just feel like it's more pleasing to the ear for me. But I still love The Wall, and I think it's a great album. I say all of this because I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know that this is one of your favorite albums of all time.
This is my favorite album of all time.
So I was getting my shit out of the way first.
Yeah. So The Wall is my favorite album of all time. It always has been. Mm-hmm. At least, since I was a child and heard it for the first time. Anything before that, Backstreet Boys doesn't count, or whatever I was listening to. Raffi, Shel Silverstein. Although Shel's got some fucking bangers.
He does, man. I was not aware that he had a musical career until relatively recently. I just knew him as the guy who wrote those books. And then I heard that song, I got stoned and I missed it. And I was like, oh, Shel Silverstein fucking wrote a song about like trying to hook up with a lady and getting too high and then forgetting the sex that he had. Which fucking rocks. It's so cool that he wrote Where the Sidewalk Ends, and also was like, man, I got fucking boofed out of my mind. Well, I can't remember this hot lady that I fucked.
He wrote A Boy Named Sue, and I think he wrote 25 Minutes to Go. Both made popular by Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash,
After Shell already made them popular, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, my favorite movie has changed. My favorite book has changed. The Wall's been pretty consistently my favorite album for most of my life.
Yeah.
As far as I can remember.
Good favorite to have. I know I said I like Dark Side of the Moon better, but I do still think The Wall is a phenomenal album and a towering achievement in terms of like rock and roll history.
And The Wall to me almost eclipses any other album. Eclipse. But like it is in like my pantheon of like all-time great works of art, regardless of genre or format or era. It's like this and Calvin and Hobbes are the two greatest artistic achievements that man has ever made.
Yeah.
And probably a couple other things I couldn't mention.
Yeah.
But I love Pink Floyd. I'm also not a Pink Floyd completist. Like you, like I didn't hear Piper at the Gates of Dawn for a very long time, and those early albums pre-Dark Side really are ones that I own, but ones that I've heard less than the big ones.
Yeah.
Love Dark Side. Darkseid has always been a bit of the normie choice for me.
Yeah. I don't disagree that it's the normie choice, but sometimes like popular opinion is the one that I line up with, not because it's popular, but because it just feels truest to me, you know?
Yeah,
where I'm like,
that's fair.
It's the one where there's a song about how we as humans experience time and money and conflict and our own sanity, right? And I'm like, I don't know, it just feels the most like a holistic encapsulation of like the human experience.
And that's what The Wall is to me.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like The Wall is a work of art that seems like it encompasses the universe within it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I feel like its meaning for me and the way that I've related to it has changed drastically over my life. I also love Wish You Were Here. Wish You Were Here is
great album.
My second favorite album of all time and my second favorite Pink Floyd album.
Yeah. My second favorite is probably Animals.
And Animals I
really
like
Animals.
but I'm a little iffy on it.
Yeah.
It's definitely great, but like it's probably if I had my top 4 is The Wall, Wish You Were Here, Darkseid, and then Animals, I think. And some other stuff that I've heard here and there, you know, I like it. I'm not really interested in exploring David Gilmour's era with the band because what I've heard from it just sucks.
Yeah.
But this has always been an important album to me since I was a child. And this film is one of the first R-rated movies that my dad showed to me when I was a kid, along with Alien and The Godfather.
Yes.
And I texted him the other night, and I was like, why the fuck did you show this to me as a kid? Because some of the imagery in this movie really disturbed me and kind of ruined my relationship with the album for a while.
Yeah, no shit, this was disturbing to see as a child. This is like a fucking psychedelic fever dream of a movie. Like, I can't imagine going into this as someone with, like, not a fully developed brain.
How old were you when you saw it?
I was probably no older than 10.
The Podmaster asked David how old he was when he saw this movie, but we probably bleeped out that question.
No, you can keep it to keep still alter my voice.
Oh, okay. We'll pitch it
Sound
down.
like a Mexican drug cartel guy getting interviewed.
Like I'm a drug mule.
Yeah.
Like you're in the witness protection program.
My dad. It was my dad.
He's just like, hey, watch this son.
And no, because I loved the album, and he told me there was a movie about it. And my dad also told me the story of going to see this in theaters with, I believe, his college friend Clyde, who his roommate, who he still is in contact with and still talks about all the time.
Classic Clyde.
Yeah.
Clyde.
Not an uncle. No. No,
You're
not my
making
uncle.
a lot of work for me on this episode if I'm gonna have to pitch all these down.
They went to go see it. They sat in the front row. And then at the end, you know, the wall exploded at the screen and like rumbled the theater. And they walked out of the theater like shell shocked in silence, and then looked at each other and did the crossed arms signal.
No, that's wrong. That's bad.
I think they were just disturbed out of their minds by this thing. That was like the only reaction they
equivalent of a Hitler salute. It is very funny later when the actual Hitler salute makes an appearance, and the dance choreography is what I can only describe as the Sieg Heil Shuffle. the Hitler salute, the classic, you know it, you're picturing it as I say it, becomes part of dance choreo.
Well, and I remember this very specifically. I remember being a kid, listening to this album, listening to my dad's tape that he recorded from his original vinyl copy, when he switched over to tapes, with the song titles written on the on the thing that came with it, whatever it's fucking called,
the fucking little like card insert
the paper.
in the cassette.
Yeah. My brain soup today too, I guess. I remember listening to it and getting to the reprise of In the Flesh on the second disc.
Yeah.
And singing those lyrics.
Screams a bunch of slurs.
Yeah. And my dad calling me into his office. He's like, you can't say that shit.
Yeah.
You can't do that, son.
You see, son, you understand that on this reprise, our protagonist, Pink, has in fact become the villain of his own story. And these slurs that he is shouting are actually, it's indicative of the fact that he's gone down a bad path that we should not be replicating. You were maybe a little young to grasp the nuance of In the Flesh.
So then putting on this movie, being like, oh, why is he a Nazi?
Yeah.
Was a real shock to the senses.
Yeah, he's a Nazi because Roger Waters was like, hey, being famous has made me a bad person. Which is like a thing that I appreciate about this story.
Yeah.
That the album tells and that the movie tells as well. The thing that has always connected with me the best about The Wall is, I know you complimented like the universality of The Wall. I kind of feel like when it's the most personal is when it's the best for me. When it's like Roger Waters saying like, me being famous has turned me into an asshole, and like I am trying to deal with what that means. Like I'm trying to deal with like the fact that I'm just like a dick now because people have appreciated the art that I've put into the world. Like that is kind of the most interesting angle of The Wall for me, you know? And I find it less interesting when it's like women be like and men be like, and that makes relationships hard. Like that's the part of this that connects with me less. And that is, by Waters' own admission, the part that came the least from his own life. He's basically like, oh, my divorce was way more amicable than what happened with Pink. Like that's kind of invented for the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's why it feels less authentic and less relatable to me, is because it's like, well, what if this guy Pink had like a really bad relationship with his wife, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not true, and it's not from Waters' own experience. What's from Waters' own experience is like standing on stage at a Pink Floyd show spitting in a fan's face because he fucking can.
That was where this came from.
Yes.
Was after Dark Side, they got all of this fame and attention, and people were coming to the shows who just wanted to hear them play Money.
Yeah.
And they didn't know the type of shows that Pink Floyd was used to putting on.
Yeah.
And on the Animals tour, it got to such a point where there was this kid screaming in the front row while Waters is trying to play, I think, Pigs on the Wing on his acoustic guitar. Just this kid just screaming in his face, and Roger spit in his face.
Yep.
And then had to self-reflect on what fame had done to him.
Right.
And then this led to the concept of the wall and building a wall between the band and the audience, which led into a stage show and then a film, which was planned from the beginning. And I think the meaning of the wall in those stage shows has changed dramatically over the course of Waters' career. When he played it in Berlin, it had a different meaning than when they played it at Earl's Court in the 80s.
Right.
80 and 81, I think, was those original Wall shows. And then when I had the opportunity to see him perform it on tour in the early 2010s, it had taken on more of a universal theme, because he has reflected on the album and been like, when I wrote it, it was about me, but now looking back on it, I think it's about the human experience and the walls that we put up around each other that separate us, and
Right.
how things like fascism and misogyny and capitalism and all of that contributes to that.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the universal themes connect with me so much, and why this album connects with me so much, is because it's a personal story told on a very grand scale. And in that grand scale, he's able to tap into some universal themes. And a lot of this is based on his own life. Like you said, he did lose his father in World War I.
Yeah.
Or World War II, excuse me.
World War II. Yeah.
There's a little bit of Sid Barrett in here too.
Yes, with the eyebrow shaving and whatnot.
Yeah, and the just the drug use and stuff like that. But it is, we'll transition to talking about the film, because we're not here to review the album. Go listen to the album.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard it.
Yes,
And then
if
watch
you
the
haven't-
movie.
If you haven't listened to one of the most iconic rock albums of all time, probably the definitive concept album ever recorded,
Yeah.
go listen to that.
And the album is mostly intact in the film.
Yeah.
There's a few songs that have been removed, a few things that have been changed and
And there's a
rearranged and re-recorded.
There's a song that's entirely added in the film too. It's like the something Tigers.
Yeah,
something.
there are two.
Yes.
There's When the Tigers Broke Free.
When the Tigers Broke Free.
And then an
yes.
extended version of Empty Spaces that was supposed to appear on the album but
Right.
didn't due
Yeah.
to space limitations.
Yeah.
Called What Shall We Do Now?
Yeah.
So like music wise, I think that's all we really need to talk about
Right.
until when it comes up.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we should do, because this is a very abstract, experimental, strange, non-linear film
Yes.
is just
surrealist, you might say.
Yeah. Just sum up the plot and then get into sequences and themes and moments that stick with us.
Right. So basically, like, what the plot is we follow Pink, and he grows up to be a rock musician, but at the beginning of the film, he's a kid, right? And his dad dies in World War II. He's raised by his mom. He grows up and gets married. Then he is elevated to like rock stardom. Him and his wife have a falling out, and there's like some infidelity that happens. And then he descends into like drug use and kind of like a self-destructive downward spiral, sort of, right? And then this culminates in essentially like a hallucinatory sequence where he kind of pictures himself as like this Hitler-esque like fascist dictator figure, and kind of reckons with his own sins, his own evils, his own ways that like he has destroyed his own. He's responsible for destroying his own life, and then he puts himself like on trial. And determines that the thing that he needs to do is rid himself of like the isolation, this wall that he has put up between himself and others. He needs to destroy that and like live authentically with the people around him, right? Is basically like as far as plot, that's pretty much what we have.
That's the story of the album as well. And the ending is ambiguous. It's left pretty ambiguous in the film too. But more or less, that's what we're dealing with here. And then there's just tons of imagery and symbolism and surrealist sequences and animation to really flesh this thing out. This was directed by Alan Parker, I should say, which Alan Parker, Roger Waters, and Gerald Scarfe, who did the animation, we'll also talk about. They clashed pretty heavily on this thing.
Roger Waters seems to clash with everybody that he works on a major creative project with. Seems like a difficult man to work with.
And I think it was just also like, this is such a strange thing to shoot at that time, I think. And the scope and the scale of this thing at points is pretty surprising.
Like the World War II sequences, which are pretty heavily represented in like the first like 10-15 minutes of this thing, like the scope of them, where it's like we're flying actual fucking like World War II bomber planes, and like there's fucking practical explosions and shit happening, where it's like, did Pink Floyd The Wall 1982 actually necessitate this level of like battlefield cinematography? I don't know, but I appreciated seeing it.
But I think it's effective.
It is. It's more effective than if they had gone smaller with it, for sure. Because it really like a big part of kind of the first bit of the album is sort of like, and in the more universal reading, right, it can basically be like, well, war and violence, which is intrinsic to the human condition, kind of traumatizes us all collectively. But like more specifically in the album, and for Waters, it's like World War II took his dad, right? And so like by showing kind of the scope of the violence in World War II, like that just like, I feel like it lands harder. So I feel like that it was the right choice to like do all the fucking practical bunker explosions and the like, all that shit.
The gore effects of like soldiers being carried out on stretchers and dead soldiers lying in the trenches. The movie and the album constantly comes back to the war. And I think really like what I got on these viewings is the war robbing, it is about the war robbing children of their fathers. And something about that is stunting their growth in this generation, and Waters' generation.
World War II, controversial take, looks like it was not fun. looks like it sucked and was bad in this movie. And but like, all jokes aside, like that's a thing that I feel like the movie does a good job of representing, both like in the live action sequences and in the animated sequence that is the big animated sequence that deals with the war is Goodbye Blue Sky, and that is maybe my favorite animated sequence of the film. I feel like it does the thing that we were just talking about, where it's like illustrating how this collective trauma has been inflicted by this like mass violent event that was World War II, right? Like, I feel like the animation does an even better job of showing it than the live action stuff does. And they complement each other really well. I really, really like that Goodbye Blue Sky sequence.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best sequences of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
Gerald Scarfe did the animation. He had worked with Pink Floyd to do like animation for their live shows.
Yeah.
And then designed characters for the album and then came back for the film. And Gerald Scarfe's, and I almost think this movie doesn't work without the Gerald Scarfe animation.
I 1000% agree, and without like tipping my hand on my like overall feelings about the film, kind of could have done with more animation, honestly. Like I was the most compelled by this thing in the animated sequences overall, I would say. There are a couple of exceptions where during like some of the live action moments I was like really drawn in, but yeah, with a couple of exceptions, I would say most of my favorite moments of this film are animated.
Mhm.
And I think this Goodbye Blue Sky sequence is like the pinnacle example of that, and it happens pretty early in the movie and kind of hooked me early.
Yeah.
Also, in this sequence, I like the live action like dove or whatever it is, that then like turns into an animated dove and like flies toward the screen and then fucking explodes, and then a Judas Priest ass screaming for vengeance bird unfurls itself, which is like both like a very like kind of tight and arresting metaphor for, you know, like the dove, which is like the symbol of peace, fucking exploding in this giant bird of prey that looks like a war machine and also like a fascist sigil, right? Like erupting and like flying into this scene of like battlefield chaos. Like that's very like compelling. Also, it's just like a really heavy metal fucking image to see this bird explode and all its blood and guts go everywhere.
I think that's part of why I liked this album more than Dark Side as a kid, was because it is dark and kind of heavy metal. I mean, like the first guitar chords of In the Flesh on that album really hook me.
Yeah.
And it's still like every time I put this album on, and that those chords hit in the song, I'm like, all right, let's fucking go. And I mean, there's a lot of dynamics and different styles on this album, and the music is, you know, consists of some shorter songs that are like interstitial tracks and shit like that, as well as longer pieces like Comfortably Numb and Mother.
Yeah.
But when this is going like dark and heavy, that's what I connected with the most as a kid.
Yeah.
And I think in the movie, the dark imagery was what I connect. Some of the dark imagery, like the Gerald Scarfe sequences, was what I connected with.
Yeah.
And I think the Goodbye Blue Sky sequence is just like such a great distillation of how war plays into the themes of this movie, because Gerald Scarfe lived through World War II in a way that Roger Waters didn't. He was a little older, so he has like memories of the Blitz.
Yeah.
So this is all coming from that. And
Yeah.
the imagery of the Nazi eagle flying over Britain, and then the characters that are called the Frightened Ones, which are basically these naked humanoid figures that have like faces that are like gas masks, huddling in the darkness and huddling in shelters, is really evocative and really powerful.
Oh yeah.
And then when like there's like a monster that grows over the skyline and becomes like
for half a second when it first emerges. It looks like a character from the webcomic The Oatmeal. It looks like, because like,
like a fat oatmeal character.
Right, like the oatmeal characters are always like, he always draws like them with like little saggy like man boobies and stuff. And like multiple chins. When it first emerges, it just looks like a fat oatmeal the oatmeal character. But then it like kind of morphs, and like that's the thing with this animation. Like everything's always morphing and changing shape, which I really, really like. I think it's really effective. And very like surrealist and kind of impressionistic in a way where it's like your eye doesn't really get a chance to get used to any one form of each of these characters because they're always like constantly like shifting and which is a really cool thing about it. But yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, the monster. I was also thinking of like what is it, like the fucking Troll King in the Hobbit movies?
Oh yeah, the Goblin King. Yeah,
Goblin King. Yeah,
yeah.
Like that shitty CGI Goblin King. Yeah, the monster like transforms into this strange dystopian factory that these bombers are flying out of.
Yeah.
And to me, that is not that like the eagle is very reminiscent of the Nazis.
Right.
This is almost like just the war machine in general,
right.
And it is not. It's not only Germany, but it's also Britain. Like
it's like how the war has changed home.
Yeah.
Right.
And perpetuating that cycle.
Right.
And then the imagery of the Union Jack, the blue and red parts of the Union Jack falling off to reveal a cross, and then the cross filling with blood. That is Britain spilling its own blood for a war that ended up meaning nothing. Like it was like soldiers just die. They don't die for their country. They die for nothing.
Yeah.
And I think the overarching theme of this narrative as well is the Allies defeated the Nazis and then grew their own forms of fascism at home.
Right.
And it came out of the institutions and the generational trauma of World War II.
Right.
And yeah, I think the Goodbye Blue Sky sequence is just fucking one of the most powerful pieces of animation ever, I think.
Yeah. I agree. It's really great stuff. It's very like visually compelling. The song is great. Goodbye Blue Sky is one of my favorite songs
great fucking song.
On the wall. Anyway, before the Goodbye Blue Sky sequence, we should mention that the youngest version of Pink who appears in this movie has like a little sequence where his mom takes him to a park. Like his dad has died in World War II. Like that's the opening of the movie. And his mom takes him to a park. And this youngest version of Pink that we get in the movie, he's probably like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 here. He's like real little. His mom just drops him off at this park and is like, go have fun, right? And he keeps trying to latch on to this dude because he doesn't have a dad. His dad fucking died in the war. And so he's like, oh, this kid has a dad. Maybe he'll be my daddy, right? And it just keeps like, he's like, hey, can you put me on the merry-go-round? And like wants him to catch him going down the slide, and then like tries to hold this guy's hand. And this guy's nice to this kid initially. And then he's like, oi, fuck off.
Fuck off, you wee cunt.
You blimey little street urchin. Oh, fucking Oliver Twist ass street urchin.
Little Pink is also like
me around.
he's got like a Beetle bowl cut, and he's like a little chubby fat kid.
This is the most British looking child of all time. He literally looks like this child who's like 4 years old is already like a member of parliament. He looks like there's something about him that looks like a grown ass British man, even though he is literally a toddler.
Well, the other kid that they found looks a lot like the actor that they have playing the dad.
Yes, he also looks like weirdly like Will Poulter.
Oh, yeah.
Did you clock that?
I didn't clock that, but now that you say that makes sense.
Yeah,
he's got a bit of a Will Poulter vibe.
Yeah, like not super young Pink, but yeah, the like middle young Pink looks to me like a little baby Will Poulter.
I did find out that the park scene isn't based on anything from Roger's life, which I think is good.
Yeah,
like
it is very sad.
And once me mum took me to the park and I couldn't find a dad, so I had to find a new dad.
I didn't have a
write
dad.
my sad rock album about that.
It's very sad. It's also, to me, one of the funniest sequences of the film.
Yeah, it's initially sad when it's like you see all the other kids playing with their dads, and he's just like sitting alone. But when he starts hanging on this guy, it's like, okay, Now it's getting funny.
If I was like at a fucking public park and some kid came up to me and was like, "Hey, can you be my dad? My dad got killed in the war." I would react the same way this guy does, which is like, stop trying to hold my fucking hand. Go away. Like, fuck off.
I do want to talk about When the Tigers Broke Free for a second, because that's one of the new songs that's in the movie, and it's broken up into a couple
Like two
parts.
Yeah.
What did you think of the song and the sequences? Because the first sequence we see with it is like at the very beginning of the movie, where it's his dad in the trenches cleaning his gun, and then later.
Yeah,
when he's
putting on his dad's uniform.
He finds his dad's uniform, puts it on, and finds like the scroll of that the king sent out.
Yeah, so
when he
the
died.
song didn't really stick out to me in the first sequence. I was sort of like, oh, this is a Pink Floyd song that's not on the album, but it was kind of washing over me as like, oh, this is a Pink Floyd song I've never heard, right? The song really stuck out to me in the second sequence where he's putting on the dad's uniform, and it kind of hits more of its like emotional crescendo in that sequence. And I was like, oh, When the Tigers Broke Free is a fucking banger. Like, I actually really was fucking with the song a lot in that sequence. And I feel like this was one of the moments in the movie where I felt like the visuals were enhancing the song for me, right? Where when he's putting on the dad's uniform, and like opens the box of bullets and is like looking at his dad's bullets from his gun and stuff. Like with this song that I had never heard before, that's not on the album, playing over it, I was like, oh yeah, this is like powerful stuff. It was really working for me.
Yeah, it worked for me a lot the first time that I saw the movie too. Initially, I was like, why isn't In the Flesh playing? I want to hear it in the flesh. And then we do hear it, and it's Bob Geldof.
Yeah.
Snarling that song.
Yes. I sort of love Bob Geldof's version of the lyrics. Like, I kind of love the way he sings in this movie.
Yeah, I've grown to love it.
There's like
the first time I was like, what is this?
Because he was in a post-punk band.
Yeah. He was famously not a fan of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Which he told his, like, he was having a conversation with his manager.
Yeah.
And the cab driver was Roger Waters' like cousin.
Yeah. I think it was his brother.
Brother or something?
Yeah. But he was basically like, yeah, I overheard the guy who's gonna be the star of the Wall movie shit talking your band.
Well, and the punk movement was a reaction to like the prog rock of the 70s too.
Yeah.
So this was not a bold take that he had among his generation of punk rockers.
No, punk rock famously was a big Pink Floyd sucks ass movement. And as a fan of both 70s punk and Pink Floyd, I'm like, I can see the argument on both sides, honestly.
Sure.
Pink Floyd does I personally don't find Pink Floyd pretentious. However, I could see how 70s punks would feel that way and be like, just get to the fucking point. Just say the thing. Stop noodling around on the guitar so much.
But yeah, Bob Geldof's voice really threw me for a loop when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But When the Tigers Broke, to bring it back to When the Tigers Broke Free.
Yeah.
I think that when the song hits its peak, it's really, really strong and powerful. And even just him, like, opening the box of bullets and, like, smiling to himself.
Yeah.
That is, like, an image of what kids are taught masculinity is. It's, like, guns and bullets and war is something that informs us as children.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that works in this movie for me overall the most, is basically being like, hey, don't we, like, as a society, fuck up young boys? Right? Which is like a thing that I feel like this movie does, is trying to say, and that message lands pretty well for me. In a way where I was like, yeah, I agree. Traditional masculinity is a prison that we inflict upon boys at a young age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think the next really big thing here is another brick in the wall.
Yeah.
Too.
Although before we get to that, I do have to call out there's a sequence where, and I don't even think this one is set to any music. It's like one of the brief interstitials with no like Pink Floyd song behind it, where Pink and his little fucking shitheel school friends go and put the bullet on the train tracks and the fucking train runs over it. And then that's the first time we get the like creepy masks, because Pink kind of has like a vision here of seeing all these like people in the train car with these masks that make their faces look all like weird and kind of blank and neutral, which is an image that will come back many, many times in this movie.
And that transitions to Happiest Days of Our Lives and Brick Part 2.
The reason that I had to call it out, though, is because in the establishing shot for this scene, the Pink and his two friends are like climbing down this hill to go to this train tracks, and there's like a very fat kid who's part of the group, and he falls and eats shit and slides down the hill. and I was just like, even in surrealist fucking concept rock opera Pink Floyd The Wall, we are not safe as viewers from fucking fat kid gags. It is so pervasive a fucking trope in cinema that it's even in Pink Floyd The Wall, where it's like, look at this fucking fat kid eat shit and roll down a hill.
One thing I laughed at that we will just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Because I'll probably forget about it.
Yeah.
Bob Hoskins is...
Sorry. One of my notes is Bob Hoskins with 3 question marks.
Bob Hoskins plays Pink's manager. It's one of his early roles.
Yeah.
During, I think it's during Young Lust.
Oh, it is. I know exactly what you're going to say.
He has a pineapple.
Yep.
Cut in half vertically.
Yep.
With the stem and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And he just takes a big old bite out of it like he's eating a piece of watermelon.
Motherfucker is going to town on this pineapple. He is eating the fuck out of this pineapple. I also made a note of that. I believe the exact phrasing of my note is Bob Hoskins chowing down on pineapple. Yeah, that stuck out to me too.
I never clocked it before.
This was my first time with this film, and I clocked it immediately.
Occasionally,
I was like, that's Bob Hoskins just gobbling pineapple.
Occasionally, I am reminded that Bob Hoskins is
British, yeah,
and not a New York detective like he is in fucking
Super Mario Brothers.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh yeah.
Like a salt of the earth American gumshoe detective.
Yeah.
He's like, no, this is the most British man who has ever lived. This is the guy at the end of the bar drinking Guinness, drinking himself into a grave.
Yeah. I think when he comes in to the Podmaster is asking me if the pineapple is a metaphor for swinging / casual sex in this movie. I don't know. Probably.
He's eating that pineapple like a pussy.
Probably. What was I gonna say? During Comfortably Numb, Bob Hoskins also has a great line delivery, which it's challenging to get a great line delivery in this movie that contains almost no dialogue, but Bob Hoskins manages it because they break in through the door while Pink's like fucking zoned down in his drug fugue, and Bob Hoskins just goes, "Fuck me." And I was like, yes, Bob Hoskins here to deliver just the most British fuck me you've ever heard. It's so good. Anyway.
But the train tunnel transitions to another Brick in the Wall Part 2. And,
yes.
Which is another very iconic moment from this film.
Yeah.
And very effective visually.
I agree that it's very effective visually. I think some of the stuff... And I think it's maybe less in the song and more in the movie, although maybe a little bit in the song for me too. Some of this just like feels like it's a little dated because it's like, oh, we're mad at the education system for robbing us all of our individuality. And it's like the big debate right now in like 2024 about public education is like, we should stop funding it and people should, religious homeschool their children so that they don't like realize that they are transgender, right? And so for me, that makes Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 hit a little bit less hard for me because I'm like, no, maybe we should send our kids to publicly funded schools so that they can like learn about science and the world and be free to explore their own gender identity and their own sexual preferences and stuff without their repressive religious parents indoctrinating them to think that they have to be one certain way. Like it seems like The Wall is coming from a place in like the 70s and 80s of like, oh, school is where they rob you of your individuality and make you into like a conformist little worker bee. And it's like now I feel like we see that more with people who like are opting out of public education. Like that's where we see people trying to shape their kids into like perfect little copies of themselves, you know?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think a lot of this is coming from like a British perspective that we just don't have because
True, yeah.
we don't live in that terrible country. Sorry, I shouldn't. I have mixed feelings on Britain, but it's not like France. I don't feel the need to dog them all the time.
I think England has earned its fair share of ridicule. What with the whole Brexit and like 14 straight years of Conservative Party rule and whatnot. Like I feel like we can prod them a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like it's fair.
Serving mushy peas,
Mushy peas are all right.
beans with breakfast.
I like a full English with the beans and everything, with the beans and the blood sausage and the listeners. I've been to the United Kingdom before, and also my family growing up were big Anglophiles. So the full English breakfast is a thing that I've consumed many times throughout my life, and I am a noted fan, beans and all. But I understand that that's a controversial take coming from an American.
Yeah, traitor.
It's good. It's a good breakfast.
So I know that this comes more.
You can miss me with that tea at breakfast though. Coffee or bust, man.
Yeah,
They're always drinking tea at breakfast, and I'm like, fucking, that's not enough caffeine. I gotta get the hard shit. You know?
Yeah, I get you.
Anyway.
But a lot of this comes from Roger Waters' experience and Gerald Scarf's experience growing up.
Right.
With like in education in post-war Britain. But I think it is also like the metaphor here to me is that the education system of the time, which is of the same authoritarian fascist ideology that Britain and the Allies were fighting against. And it is leading to a generation of conformists who don't question things, because this is all leading to Thatcher. This is leading to Thatcher and leading to Reagan.
Right.
And it's also about just like the generational trauma being the cycle of generational trauma being inflicted on each other. The issue with public education is, the issue with public education that's always been in place is how much does it reinforce the status quo?
Right.
And I think in America, we're starting to see pushback from the right against public education. But in a lot of ways, I still think public education just is designed to bred obedient citizens.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it definitely like serves its role in society. It's basically like, well, the school is basically where you become socialized into being like a member of the nation that you live in, right? It's why they make us do the Pledge of Allegiance and shit, right? So yeah, like all of that stuff still lands. I just feel like the schools are fucking up our kids just maybe landed a little bit harder like in the 70s and 80s than it does now.
And the visual metaphor of the kids being, falling into a meat grinder and being led through this labyrinth and walking on an assembly line and coming out with the masks on their faces and sitting in school desks.
Yeah.
It's very on the nose.
It is quite like a lot of the visuals in this movie. It is quite on the nose.
I think it is one of the more on the nose visuals of the film.
I would argue that the most on the nose visuals of the film are when multiple female characters transform into animated vaginas. I would argue that is the most on the nose.
Yeah.
That then swallow up and threaten our protagonist. It's like, oh no, your mom and your wife are just a big scary vagina coming to get you. I'm like, all right, Alan Parker and Roger Waters and animator's name who I forget.
Gerald Scarf.
Gerald Scarf. All right, I get it. Vaginas are scary. You fear women.
And that's kind of where we're at, I think.
Yeah. Actually, before we get to that, you did mention these school children going into a meat grinder and being ground up into meat paste. So it's time for another installment of Would We Eat This? David, would you eat the ground up children in Pink Floyd The Wall?
It's been a while since we've done this bit. I didn't expect to come back to it on this episode.
I saw this meat grinder grinding up these kids, and I was like, I gotta do it to him.
So, we have previously established that we're both pro-cannibalism.
Yeah.
There's a couple things to consider here.
Right.
The diet of an English school child in post-war Britain.
Yeah, that's not prime meat necessarily.
And then the actual visual of the meat coming out of the meat grinder itself, which looks like the pink slime that they make chicken nuggets out of.
Which, to be fair, I do enjoy chicken nuggets that are made of that pink slime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck, like you got the blood sausage in there that they're eating, fish and chips.
The Podmaster is giving me a thumbs up. She would eat the ground up children.
Oh,
just for record, she has weighed in.
All the seasonings that they stole from India that that they don't use.
Isn't it so fucked that tikka masala isn't actually chicken tikka masala? Like, isn't an Indian dish? That was just British people being like, "Oh, well, let's make Indian food."
We can riff on this.
And like the most popular thing at like every Indian restaurant is just British people being like, "Oh, this is Indian food, isn't it?
Have you seen the TikToks of
butter chicken, isn't it?
I got some Chinese takeaway," and they pull out like fries and just like gray meat, and then they dump a brown sauce all over it.
Man, who let them colonize 3/4 of the world?
Jesus Christ.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I'll eat the fucking kids.
Yeah, I was sort of this one for me was kind of like a soft yes, where I was like, yes, I'm not opposed to cannibalism, obviously, as we've previously discussed. And given the opportunity to try a meatball or a hamburger patty made out of ground up school children from Pink Floyd The Wall, I would not necessarily turn it down. I am a little bit apprehensive just because they're being ground up clothes and all.
Oh,
and
good
I'm
point.
Like, there's going to be a lot of like clothing fibers and microplastics and shit in there, if any of that's polyester. Although I guess these are like 1940s school children. So maybe not a lot of polyesters yet. It might be more organic fabrics that are more digestible. But that was the one thing that was kind of throwing me, is because I was like, I don't know, there's going to be like fucking...
They got those like boots on.
Yeah.
The shiny shoes.
But to your point, you know, there's all kinds of shit in that pink slime that they make chicken nuggets out of.
Yeah.
They like put the whole chicken in there. There's beak and shit in there, and I'm eating that, so I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I think, what would you make the kid into? The kid meat into?
I feel like the move, just because if there is any like shoe leather in there, it'll give it the most chance to like break down, is like a meatloaf. Because that's going to be like cooked low and slow. You know?
That's fair.
Yeah, so I feel like a meatloaf would be the way to go. With the ground up kids from Pink Floyd The Wall.
I feel like I would probably do a burger.
Yeah.
And just like make a small one just to try it out.
Yeah.
Also, the meat is pretty lean too.
Yeah.
So I would probably have to add something to the meat that's coming out of the grinder looks pretty lean.
Yeah.
I know those fat little tubby tea and crumpets eating motherfuckers.
They are pretty thin kids, most of them. They look like they're a little bit more like the Oliver Twist type of British child, as opposed to that fat kid who fell down the hill earlier. Now that kid I would make into a burger. That's a nice 80-20 mix. This is but another installment of Would We Eat This? Anyway, yes, we were talking about how every woman in this movie just turns into a giant floating animated vagina. So I assume you were going to get into Mother next.
Yeah, Mother, and I mean, what else? The beginning of Empty Spaces.
Yeah.
This is where we get his relationship with his mother and his relationship with his wife.
Yes.
And yeah, it's misogynistic.
This is the part of this movie that not the song Mother, but like the bits about his mom fucking him up and his wife fucking him up are the things I have always liked about the album the least, and that is only amplified by the visuals in the movie. Because like in the album, on like Empty Spaces and What Do We Do Now and Young Lust, it feels more even in the breakdown of the marriage on the album between like who is being shitty to who, right? It feels like it's like these are two people who are bad for each other and they're kind of like butting heads and trying to make a doomed relationship work, and it slowly falls apart, is what I hear on the album. In the movie, it's basically like he's a tortured artist. She tries to understand him and fails, and then she just goes and fucks some other dude. And I feel like for me lacks some of the depth and the nuance that I feel like I get from the album version of this story. And in the movie, it just basically feels like, oh, she didn't understand that when he was catatonically moping, it was because he was an artist. And so she was wrong to go fuck that guy, even though her husband was ignoring her while she was stripping in front of him.
See, and I think, I don't think you're necessarily wrong.
Right.
I think narratively, this is maybe the weakest point of the film.
It is
that we don't get enough of his relationship with the mother.
Yeah.
Because weirdly, the song "Mother" focuses mostly on his just relationship with romantic partners.
And then when we see his mother being quote unquote overbearing later in the movie, it's mostly because like she wouldn't let him keep a diseased rat as a pet. And I'm like, no, that's good. That's good parenting. Like, so I agree. We don't really see enough of like how his relationship with his mother has like led to forming like his views about the world and stuff later in life, because we mostly see her like take care of him when he's sick and snuggle with him in bed and not let him keep a rat. And I'm like, I need to see her be like a little bit more like of a disciplinarian or a little bit more like twisted and Oedipal.
Yeah, because what we get here is mostly him like looking out the window with binoculars on a girl that's changing across the street.
Yes, a girl who looks a lot like the actress who will later play his wife when he grows up, which is very pointed. It's like he has like a very clear type.
Oh yeah, and the groupie, who also is in Near Dark. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
she plays the romantic lead in Near Dark.
Oh, cool.
The groupie looks a lot like his wife too.
Yeah. Yes, Pink has a type.
Pink has a type.
Although he doesn't do anything with the groupie, which
Same.
I think is incorrect. Because to me, in the song "Young Lust" on the album, I take that as Pink cheating, right? I take that as him being like, I'm fucking all these groupies while I'm on tour. And then that on the album, "Young Lust" ends with the phone call where he calls his wife and a man answers the phone and the operator's like, hey, so you sure that was your wife? Because a dude answered and hung up, right? And I think it's a mistake that in the movie they put the phone call before Young Lust, because it absolves Pink of like the quote unquote bad behavior that song illustrates. And then also the movie absolves him further by never having him actually fuck the groupie. Right? She basically talks to him while he's catatonic. He watches the TV, and then he menaces her in a very frightening and disturbing way for several minutes. And like she doesn't even take her clothes off. And I'm like, I feel like we are putting too much of the onus of the infidelity in this relationship on the wife versus what I had picked up on from the album, which is that like both of them were fucking around.
Yeah. I think what I get from the wife more this time is like he's just not communicative. He's always in this catatonic druggy state. And then she starts going to this activist, I think it's nuclear disarmament.
Yes.
She starts going to activist rallies. She falls for the guy who's there because he is
actually capable of human speech
and he's like actually giving her something in relationship.
Yes, giving her attention when she takes her clothes off, as opposed to her husband who's like, I can't see, your tits are in the way, love. I gotta see the fucking TV, the telly.
So when like the imagery of the sexual flowers and the praying mantis come back, it is like it's not accurate to the way that she's portrayed in the film.
Yes,
and I think that is
1000%.
And I think that is intentional.
Yeah,
I think that is very intentional. Where like his perception of her is this like controlling,
shrewish.
Shrew's a good word. Predator.
Yeah.
That is oppressing him, and Ril's like, no, she's just like,
no, she just wanted to talk to you, dude.
You paid attention to her more.
Yeah, which is like crazy that then during the trial, like. That is one of the things that she says is like, you should have talked to me more often than you did. It's like, she's right. Like, yeah, you're completely ignoring her and not investing in this relationship at all. No wonder she went and fucked some dude who would actually speak to her. Anyway,
There's not much to say about Young Lust other than I think it's probably the first time I saw boobs in a movie.
yeah.
And being a young Christian boy, I was like,
Well,
Dad, what are you showing me?
can't have been the first time because you actually see boobs. You see his wife's boobs. You see his wife's boobs first because you see them right before Young Lust because the phone call happens before Young Lust and she's laying in bed with the
Yeah,
dude.
it was. I think it was side boob. But as far as like full on, like those
like
are boobs bouncing
full
in
on-
front of the camera.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's Young Lust.
Yeah.
I
I don't know the first time I saw boobs in a movie. The first R-rated movie I saw was The Patriot, and there's no boobs in that. I don't know.
Huh.
Can't remember. I probably saw boobs on the internet before I saw them in a movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Probably saw them in porno before I ever. Actually, no. I remember the first movie I saw boobs in. I went to see Across the Universe in the theater when it came out, and I was probably like 14.
Yeah.
And that's a PG-13 movie, but there
Rare
is
PG-13 boob.
Yep. I went to see that with my like eighth grade girlfriend, and saw boob in that movie. Who's the lead female lead?
Evan Rachel Wood?
Evan
Was it-
Rachel Wood.
I haven't seen it in a while.
Yes, I saw. But they get away with it because they only show one of her boobs, but it is a close up.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first time I saw boobs.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Cool. The empty spaces. What shall we do now? Is more of Gerald Scarf's animation, and another one of my favorite sequences in this movie.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, again, like the imagery of the fucking flowers is somewhat misogynistic, but I think thematically the movie explains that away with like this is just his perception of his wife that isn't at all realistic.
Yeah.
And then I really like the extended version of the song.
Yes, I agree with everything that you said in terms of like I like the animation, and I do agree that any like misogyny here is like intentional and from the perspective of a character who we are meant to be critiquing. That being said, I'm maybe less positive on this sequence than you are, the dick flower and the vagina flower sequence.
Mm-hmm.
For the sole reason that I feel like it goes on long enough that I did start going, okay, I get it. I get it. Vagina flower, eat penis flower. I understand. It just feels like because the version of the song is extended, they had to cover more music. And it's like, how many ways can we make vagina flower menace penis flower? And I was like, it just felt like I was being, pun intended, hammered over the head with the symbolism here a little bit. And I was like, all right, yeah, I understand that the character is viewing this relationship through a misogynist lens. Can we please move on to the next thing? It's sort of how I felt.
I think it works for me because of just Gerald Scarf's animation is so good.
It is really good.
And I love the way that the flowers change into like the humanoid figures biting each other, and then eventually into like the dragon.
Yeah. I do like the penis dragon or vagina dragon consuming the little penis thing and flying away with it in its mouth.
But even like some of the I guess for lack of a better word, foreplay, to me that tells part of the story.
Yeah,
in a way that works for me. And then I like the song itself. I go back and forth on whether I wish this version had been on the original album or not.
Yeah.
Because they always played at the live shows. But it's this like little bit of like consumerism critique that we throw in here of him like filling his life with all of the perks of being a rock star.
Yeah.
Rather than human relationships.
Yeah. And like is this is where like the wall going up is laid.
The wall goes up here.
Oh, the wall goes up here.
The animated version of the wall appears here.
Yes. So I actually do really like this animated sequence. The song bit here, I can like sort of it serves its purpose, right? But like the animation here I really enjoy. This is the first time we see there's like a kid, and then when the wall goes up past him, there's like a kid playing in like a sunny field of flowers, and the wall goes up past him, and he like immediately transforms into like a hulking like adult-sized monster man who then like beats another dude over the head with a club, and this dude's head explodes and blood goes all over the wall. That whole
He's in the white supremacist uniform.
yes, and like his face turns into one of the like skinhead faces. That whole little bit of animation is one of my favorite like moments of visual symbolism in the movie, because it's like, oh yeah, when you like cut yourself off from empathy towards your fellow man, that is like what creates like violent, intolerant people, right? And it just, that little like 5-second animation shows it very, very clearly, and it's one of the moments where, even though the symbolism of the animation is like obvious, I don't feel like it is clunky. It felt very like elegant while also being very clear in what it was trying to say. So I wanted to call that one out. And also I like that guy's head getting smashed by the club because it's gory and it is cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. And they bring it back a couple times and I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
There's that animated head smash again. Yeah.
I also like the part where I'm trying to remember how it starts, but I guess it is part of like that consumerist, elite, luxurious rock star critique of like the machine gun changing into like a drug needle, into a guitar, into a fancy car.
Yeah.
There's like ice cream at one point, which I always thought was funny and weird, and I don't know why that's there.
Yeah, it's also like shaped like a sexy lady for a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then I think kind of winding down the first half of the album here is him destroying the hotel room.
Yeah. Just rampaging while this poor girl. So this like
Hard to watch.
it's hard to watch. Also, like, again, I feel like this works better for me on the album maybe than it does in the movie, the hotel rampage specifically. Because like, if the groupie had left, had been like, wow, this guy's catatonic and isn't gonna fuck me, I'm out of here, and then he had trashed the hotel room, I feel like it would almost be better, because then the moment would be more about him and what's happening in his own head. But because we're following this poor woman who he is terrorizing for this sequence, I was just like, why is he trying to kill this woman? She was nice to him. Like, what is his problem? And I was like focused more on her than I should have been, because like in the scene, that's where my empathy was, is with this poor girl who is like in danger, and he's like throwing wine bottles at her head, and I'm like, why? She just asked if she could get you a glass of water. She was being very polite and pleasant. So, I just feel like it works better for me if this moment is more about his inner turmoil and less about him like acting out in anger because a woman dared to want to fuck him. Like, I know that's not what the movie is saying, but during this part of the movie, I did sort of get the thought in my head as like I know what the movie is actually saying here is it's like he is acting out against other people, not because of what they did to him, but because he is so displeased with himself, right? That he is like externalizing the anger and displeasure that he has like with himself and lashing out against the people who are around him. And that's why he's isolating. It's because he doesn't want to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that on an intellectual level. That being said, I could not shake that an alternative reading to this whole him trashing the fucking hotel room and then laying in the pool with his bleeding palm like it's fucking Jesus stigmata, also just has the whole overtone of Roger Waters being like, I feel so sorry for myself that I can't even fuck all the women who are constantly throwing themselves at me. And that makes me like Jesus in a way.
I don't think that's what he was saying.
I know. However, I feel like it could have been filmed in a way that didn't make that one of the thoughts in my brain. Where I was like, it does seem like he trashes this hotel room after a woman throws herself at him and then lays in a pool bleeding like he is Jesus Christ. And maybe there was a better way to say the thing that they were trying to say in a way that didn't seem like, how dare all these women try to fuck me? I am burdened by the
Well, I think it is like
by all these women's horniness for me, a rock star.
I think
how dare they want to fuck me?
I think the thing is like he's only able to see women as sexual objects.
Yeah.
And the fact that obviously like this is after he discovers his wife's infidelity and all that shit. Just her trying to talk to him and like get anything out of him.
Yeah.
Is too much for him to take, and it causes him to trash the hotel room. It's a sequence that doesn't work as well for me in the film as well, but also on the album. It's never, I mean, I enjoy the song, but as far as how it fits into the story, it's always been a little bit murky for me.
Right.
And then this really just leads into him closing himself off. This is the end of the first half of the album.
Yeah.
The wall goes up.
You know what I do like is the visual bit that immediately follows this, though, after he trashes the hotel room. And he starts making art out of his destruction.
Yes.
This is this is my favorite live action visual moment of this entire movie, is all these like mosaics that he is making with like shattered glass and broken and like torn up photos and like cigarettes that he's like pulled out of the package and empty Coke cans and the broken TV and everything. He like takes everything that he has like destroyed in this fit of like self-destructive rage and arranges it artistically. And I'm like, what a beautiful metaphor for the act of like creation, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, I'm taking all of this like shitty stuff that has happened to me and shitty stuff that like I've done to myself, and then like presenting it in a way that is like pleasing for other people to engage with.
Well, and that's also just what he's been doing for the duration of the film, the duration of the album.
Yeah,
is sorting through the broken parts of his life
and
trying to find some sort of meaning out of it.
Yes, he's imbuing them with meaning. Yeah.
And I know, like, I did watch this when he's floating in the pool, and I was like, that's kind of a Jesus image thing. I don't know where that's coming from, but here he's like shattered his guitars.
Yeah.
And he's arranged in the center of this like tableau that he's made. He's arranged the guitars in like a cross.
Yeah.
And that came back, and I still don't necessarily know what that means. I don't necessarily know what a lot of this movie means at points, but that's the first time that any sort of Jesus imagery has entered my interpretation of the movie at all.
Him bleeding in that pool is very, very Christ-like.
Yeah.
It's a pretty, at least for me, it was a pretty obvious, like, Jesus. Because especially him bleeding from the palm. I was just like, well, that's... but yeah. But I really, really like this visual sequence. And I like him moving the Coke can to like arrange it perfectly so that it says what he's trying to say, and it's like not clear what he's trying to say, and that's the point. Is it's basically like, well, it means something to him, right? He's the one who is like imbuing this with meaning, and if it doesn't make sense to you when you're engaging with it, that's the point. Is that it's personal, it's his, right? And I just really like all that stuff. I thought it was the most effective live action part of the movie for me.
Yeah. I think it's one of the more effective ones for me too.
Yeah.
We should. There's a big black mark on this movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Which we should just talk about and move on from.
No
Hey You.
Yeah. I agree. One of the best songs on the album.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't figure out how to film it.
The sequence that they had is actually on the DVD as a bonus feature.
Okay.
And they thought that the movie was too long.
Yeah.
So they cut Hey You, reworked some of the a lot of the footage that was there was already repetitive.
Yeah.
From other parts of the film. So they reworked some of it into different parts of the movie. It was just like, we don't really know what to do here, and this movie's too long and dour. Let's take it out.
I feel like there's other things they could have cut.
I think so too.
I feel like they could have cut some of the mom and wife stuff. Not the mom stuff, because the mom stuff's already too short. But I feel like they could have cut some of the wife stuff. Like, I feel like when she comes back as the animated praying mantis, and there's the composite animation live action sequence, which song is that set to? It doesn't matter.
I watched the movie twice and I forgot, honestly.
Yeah, and that's the point, right?
I think it's Brick Part 3 maybe.
Yeah. I feel like just shorten that, excise that, make Brick Part 3 a little shorter. It's fine, and give us Hey You, because it's a better song. I don't know.
I was also thinking like ending with going from Goodbye Cruel World right into Is There Anybody Out There is just like a very, very dark, depressing low that the movie hits.
Now, that being said, I do like how ugly and unpleasant this movie is.
Yeah.
The lift of Hey You would have been nice, but...
I mean, Hey You is a very sad song, but it is also like, it's Hey You. It's
right.
one of the singles. You got Gilmore fucking shredding on the guitar.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a pick-me-up, right?
Yeah,
in comparison to Goodbye Cruel World and Is There Anybody Out There?
Right. But that being said, like, I agree the song is good. I agree they should have left it in. I think leaving the tone low and ugly and bleak is not like, it doesn't ruin the movie for me.
No.
Because this movie is at its best when it is ugly and bleak, I think. Which sort of leads us into like the next chunk of this movie.
Yeah, the Nobody Home, Vera, Bring the Boys Back Home, which is one of my favorite live action sequences in the movie. Is Nobody Home. He's sitting watching TV, and it transitions back to the World War II battlefield.
Yeah.
And him as a kid wandering through the trenches.
Yeah. I also really like this sequence. I like him interacting with his younger self. I like the part where his younger self is exploring the ruins of, and like it's a World War II battlefield, but he then finds this building and like wanders into the building and finds adult Pink at like basically like in a straitjacket. And he turns around and like kind of jump scares his younger self, and his younger self like flees from him, which like all of that, the symbolism there, and how like like at a certain point he's become a person who his younger self would not want to see, right? It wouldn't want to interact with. It's like that's like a very like heavy kind of thing to reckon with. And I love all the interplay between young Pink and adult Pink.
Yeah,
that's all great stuff.
I like that too. I can't remember if the adult Pink turned around and going, I can't remember if that scared me as a kid, but I think maybe like I remember like my heart rate increasing a bit. Is that like that feeling you get when you go over a roller coaster is like, oh God, oh okay, we're fine.
I think it's really effective.
Yeah.
And definitely it was one of those things where like as a visual moment, I was like, oh yeah, I've kind of felt that way. Like I've gone to therapy and like thought about how my younger self would feel about my adult decisions and stuff. And like it is sort of like that, being like, oh, like there's something in me as an adult that would like frighten my younger self, and I should maybe like be kinder to the child inside of me and like temper those worst impulses, which I feel like is kind of what the movie's saying. Yeah.
And the image of the crossed hammers has been alluded to throughout the movie. It's going to be the symbol of the white supremacist, his imagined white supremacist group.
Yes.
It comes back here, like in the barbed wire on the battlefield. You see these two crossed hammers, and there's also like hammers in the machinery of the Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 sequence and stuff like that. And I think the hammers are just a very good visual metaphor for this movie. And I love that their placement here is like education and institutions, and in this case, war and the military-industrial complex are the same destructive forces that he is going to inflict on other people,
right?
In the white supremacist sequence, in the rally sequence, and I think that's really well done. Justus, in 49 episodes of the show, this has not happened before.
Yeah,
but it happened with this movie. I'm introducing the David Cry count.
Whoa. Damn.
I feel like I've gotten close on a few movies.
Yeah.
But as far as like full-on tears,
David
Cry count.
All right.
For this one. Would you like to guess what it is?
I'm gonna say I feel like you probably didn't cry that many times, but I do feel like it's probably more than once. So I'm gonna say 2.
The guess is 2.
2.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Okay, the guess is 2.
Yeah.
The David cry count for Pink Floyd The Wall
Uh-huh.
is 2.
Hell yeah. I was right on the money.
Hey!
Money!
So
Yeah.
I cried during Bring the Boys Back Home.
Yeah, what was it? What did it?
I don't know.
Just the whole thing? Just kind of the
it's
whole
it's
vibe?
he wanders down to the train station where the men are returning from war.
Yeah, his dad's not there.
His dad's not
He
there.
pulls on some guy's coat, and it's another dude who's like,
"Hey,
"Hey, fuck off!
Fuck off, you little wanker!"
All of a twist ass."
And then the kids, there's like there are like boys coming through. They're like a marching band.
Yeah.
And then everyone on the train platform starts singing, and it's weird because I've always felt like Vera and Bring the Boys Back Home come back at a weird time in the album. It's like it's weird to come back to the war imagery here, but here it was like, oh, this is really just the root of everything.
Right.
Is that we shouldn't send people off to war.
Yeah.
And rob people of their lives and their families and rob children of their fathers.
Yeah.
Which is like, I don't know. Yeah, war sucks. That's a very
Right.
bold thing to say, but I think the way this movie says it is very powerful and impactful.
I agree. I think that war sucks and war does bad things to society and to men in society is not like a novel observation, but I do think that like the creative team behind the movie and also like Roger Waters as kind of the primary creative force behind the album find sort of a new way to say that relatively old message. Yeah.
And we haven't mentioned it really, but like the editing in this movie I think is fucking fantastic. This is like should be shown in film schools for like an example of the Kuleshov effect. Like this movie is just so well edited and it creates so much theme and meaning just from the editing itself. And the moment of editing that made me cry in this is at a certain point I think the marching band is like marching away from the crowd of people, and it cuts between them marching away to soldiers marching away too, and it is just like, again, like this cycle is continuing of these boys are going to grow up to be soldiers, grow up to die, and then it's just going to keep going on and on. And I thought that was really, really effective. Also, one of the I listened to the album.
Yeah.
I listened to the demos. I watched the Live in Berlin performance. I watched the film version of the early 2010s tour, and then I watched the movie twice. So I've been
wall maxing.
deep. I've been deep behind the bricks of the wall all week. I was also probably the reason this sequence made me cry is in the Berlin video, the Berlin concert, which was done at the site of the Berlin Wall a year after the wall fell down.
Yeah.
He brought out like the Soviet Army marching band to do Bring the Boys Back Home, and like I don't know, it just kind of hit me really, really hard watching it.
Yeah.
When I was watching the Berlin version, so then the tears came when I watched it this time.
Yeah.
The other time that I cried is at the very end when we're montaging through the movie and the wall explodes.
Oh, interesting. So I thought you cried twice. I thought the other time you might have cried was during Comfortably Numb, because that song makes me feel some type of way.
We should just go there.
We're pretty much there.
We're pretty much there. Comfortably Numb is one of the greatest songs ever written.
I fully concur. I'm not even as big of a Pink Floyd head as you.
It has, but by virtue of having two of the best guitar solos ever written.
Yes. Also, David Gilmour singing that fucking chorus. Or it's not even the... No, it is
it's the chorus.
Yeah. David Gilmour singing that chorus is... I didn't cry watching this movie. The only time I got close was hearing David Gilmour singing the chorus of Comfortably Numb, because the man just has a gorgeous voice, and it just feels like I am like sailing on fucking nebulas in the cosmos when I'm listening to David Gilmour sing while he's like playing fucking shimmering guitar riffs. I'm just like, holy shit, the man fucking makes me transcend. The way that some people feel about like Jerry Garcia, I feel about David Gilmour, where I'm like, he feels like he's like a spiritual like medium to me. He's like a spiritual antenna that I can tune into. Listening to Breathe in the Air, I listened to Dark Side of the Moon in preparation for this episode in addition to The Wall. I listened to both.
Oh, okay.
But I listened to The Wall, and then to make sure that I like Dark Side of the Moon better, I listened to Dark Side of the Moon again, and I was like, yeah, I like it better. But listening to Breathe in the Air, I had that feeling about David Gilmour, where I was like, something about his fucking vocals on Breathe in the Air, I'm just like, oh man, this is like my religion.
I think part of why I don't connect to Gilmour as a singer that as much as you do, is as a kid, the voices of Roger Waters, Rick Wright, and David Gilmour were all so similar to me that I could not distinguish one from the other, and just thought there was one guy singing
Gilmour's
for a long
the chill
time.
one. Waters is the mad one.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I get it now. Rick Wright, great singer too.
Yeah.
People, I think Rick Wright is really the unsung hero of Pink Floyd.
I truly agree. In my opinion, my favorite piece of music that Pink Floyd has ever written is Great Gig in the Sky, which is pretty much a Wright composition.
So I did not cry during Comfortably Numb.
Yeah.
What I did do from Comfortably Numb to the end of the film the second time I watched it was just look at the movie with like Alex from Clockwork Orange eyes with like the biggest frown on my face, just like, oh man, shit's fucked up. Comfortably Numb, great song, great sequence. This sequence ruined the song for me as a kid. This was the scariest part of the movie
You
for
mean
me.
you don't like when Pink melts like he's the guy in RoboCop who gets covered in toxic waste as a child?
It becomes a cocoon, and then he pulls it off and triumphantly emerges as a fascist
Nazi?
Dictator?
Yes.
Yeah, scared the shit out of me
Can't imagine why.
as a child and ruined this very beautiful and lovely song.
Yes, wonderful song. Interesting visuals to accompany this song. I think it works in the movie, but just like when I'm listening to it on the album, it's not necessarily the vibe that I get from this song on the album. And then like in the movie, it is very ugly and chaotic and upsetting visually. But I think it works for the movie.
And I was also like, I didn't need more lore on that fever that they talk about in the song. I didn't need the backstory of that.
Yes.
But I kind of get it. Like I think it's like he has this one friend. His new friend is this rat that he found.
Is a diseased rat
that he can connect to.
His mother, that bitch, won't let him keep. That was sarcasm.
That
to be
crone
clear.
of a mother.
Yeah. She is correct in not letting him keep this diseased rat. And the movie does sort of present it like, can you believe this? Can you believe that she wouldn't let him keep this disgusting animal?
And they're cutting that back and forth between that and then Bob Hoskins and the doctors and trying to break him out of his catatonic stupor to go to the show.
Yeah.
Also, after he has dramatically shaved his eyebrows off,
he does shave
and
off
his body
eyebrows
hair
and his chest,
cut his
he
hair.
has to be pure. I heard that he was also supposed to shave his head.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Yeah, he refused. The actor refused.
Yeah, this comes from from Syd Barrett.
Yeah.
This is where Syd Barrett creeps back in here a little bit. Also, the song "Nobody Home" is basically all about Syd Barrett.
Right.
One of my favorite songs on the album.
Yeah.
But Syd Barrett showed up at Abbey Road Studios when they were recording "Wish You Were Here."
Yes.
With all of his body hair shaved off and severely overweight, and everyone was like, "Who the fuck is that?" And he's just kind of milling around.
Yeah.
And then they realized it was Syd.
And they asked him what he liked of the song, and he said, "Sounds a bit old," which I fucking love.
And that was the last time they saw him.
Yeah.
Before he died, and I mean he died several years later.
Yeah.
But that was the last communication they had with him because his brain was just fried at that point.
And by all accounts, like the last years of his life were pretty peaceful and pleasant. He went to the beach with his sister. He painted a lot of paintings, and the whole like Pink Floyd's mad genius Syd Barrett went insane, tragically insane thing. There is some truth to that, it sounds like, but it also sounds like he sort of was okay in
Yeah.
the later years of his life and just didn't want to engage with journalists or the public or his former bandmates. He valued his privacy.
Yeah, he had a couple critically acclaimed solo albums that he wrote after he left Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
I don't know that they were necessarily financially successful, but like they're good albums from all accounts.
Yeah.
So I think the tortured artist narrative, people lean into that a little bit too much.
A little bit too heavily with Syd Barrett. Yeah.
But you can tell that his he was definitely a sore spot for the band. And it's something that they carried with them for a long time.
Just to call out a great lyric from Comfortably Numb, because I was praising Roger Waters as a lyricist, is "The child is grown, the dream is gone" is an all-time lyric for me. What a great lyric.
Yeah.
And it's accompanied very well by the visuals in this movie.
Yeah. And the visual of him, of young Pink, running across the looks like a rugby field. Like there's like a goalpost in the background.
Yeah.
Is really strong to me. And like, there's not, it isn't really elaborated on much, but that is like, to me, it represents like the happy moments of his childhood. And I think I don't know, that I associate with this song pretty strongly, because I've always considered the song to be pretty bright and like definitely, dark in places, but like those soaring guitar solos and stuff.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that image. And now that I am not, 9 or whatever, the image of him
melting
into a Nazi is really effective. And this takes us to the rally, which covers the songs In the Flesh, Run Like Hell, Waiting for the Worms, and then we get to the trial.
In the Flesh, so a lot of the songs in the movie have been re-recorded or remixed for the movie. In the Flesh is one of the few times where I like the version in the movie better than the version on the album.
You like the orchestral version more?
I love the orchestral version.
I thought it's
of In
really
the Flesh.
cool.
I love the fucking full-on backup choir, the whole brass band. It's like so fucking good. I like it so much better than the album version. And that's rare. Most of the remixed or re-recorded versions for the movie, I prefer the album version, but In the Flesh, I was really, really fucking with.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Mother. Mother's drastically different, and I think the album version is way better.
I completely agree. Yeah. Also, just since we went back to Mother for a second, I always, because I am 10 years old, laugh at the line, "Mother, do you think they'll try to break my balls?"
Yes, that's funny.
My balls.
My balls. Roger's like, I really need to end this verse with "Mother, should I build a wall?"
Yeah.
I can
What
only
rhymes
think of
with wall?
one other word that rhymes with wall.
My balls. Anyway, yes, we get In the Flesh. The song that David's father told him not to sing out loud because it contains slurs.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't say those things.
No, Pink shouldn't say them either, and that's the point
I
of the
do think
song.
it's funny when he gets to, both in the album and in the movie, there's one smoking a joint and another with spots.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, now we're just hating on stoners and people with freckles.
Yeah, which as someone who has smoked weed and has lots of freckles, I take exception to. I have hella freckles. I'd be dead as hell at a fucking Pink show.
and while I think Jewish folks and African Americans
and members of the queer
community don't need to be shot.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think anyone should be shot for smoking weed or having freckles.
Yes, I agree. I think none of those people should be shot for any of those reasons. Controversial take.
And I wonder if that's part of the point, is like it gets to this like this level where he's just singling out anyone who's different.
Yeah. I think it is part of the point. Right?
And all of
this,
this,
just any reason to be antagonistic towards someone, they're just finding and exploiting.
This rally sequence is
horrifying.
And again, one of the visual highlights of the film for me, in a bad way, because it's just like really hard to watch, and it was hard to watch as a kid.
Yeah, it's unpleasant, and that's the point.
And I think what stuck out to me this time is, obviously this is happening in his head. But if we took that away and thought about it in a literal sense,
right,
and thought about he is perpetuating the fascism of Germany, of post-war Britain, and Thatcherism that was inflicted on him.
Yeah.
How do you get fascists?
Right.
You get the kids. You
Yep.
convert the kids. And how would you do that in the 80s? What if there was a fascist rock concert?
Right. Rock music.
And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
had their own fucking coordinated Sieg Heil dance routine.
Not the Sieg Heil shuffle. Yeah.
And it is like, and it's a little funny. I was watching. It's like, oh, they're doing the Sieg Heil shuffle or whatever I thought it was. And it's a little funny, but it's like, no, that would happen.
Right. It's disturbing as well because it's like, no, yeah, that's how these cultural forces gain traction, right?
Mhm.
These dangerous and subversive political ideas get legitimized in the culture, right? And that's how they spread. And watching this movie
Dangerous and subversive for the wrong reason.
for the wrong reasons. Yes.
Yes.
But
Not dangerous and subversive because they disrupt the status quo in a way
No.
that benefits minorities.
no. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
That should. Yes.
I know what you meant, but I was
yeah,
like, I don't know. I just wanted to interrogate that for a second.
Yeah, no, you're right. But it was reminding me, this rally sequence honestly was reminding me a lot of like being on Twitter. where I was like, oh yeah, like this is sort of what it's like, where like there's these fucking right-wing grift accounts that buy 10,000 followers
Mhm.
and then a bunch of actual impressionable fucking 17-year-olds on Twitter who are like edgelords find these accounts that are like saying a bunch of slurs and stuff, and they're like, oh, cool, this guy's my friend, I'm gonna buy his crypto or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it feels very like, it feels very of its time as a movie that came out in 1982, but it also feels very relevant
Yeah.
to today, where it's like, yeah, this is the way that like shit like this gets legitimized, is by like someone cool touting it.
So In the Flesh results in his, skinhead cronies very disturbingly dragging people from the crowd and beating them
Yeah.
into Run Like Hell, where we get the synchronized dance routine
Yes.
of the Sieg Heil Shuffle. I always, in the narrative of the album and of course in the movie, I always figured Run Like Hell is just like another part of the white supremacists going into the town and causing mayhem and chaos. I recently discovered that Roger Waters' meaning behind the song is it's just the next song that he's playing, like it's part of his show, which is really interesting to me. That again, in this world of like he's a Nazi rock star, he's like playing his big hit, which is about how we're Nazis and we're gonna come get you if you're different.
Yeah.
And you should run like that was here. Learning that and then watching it in the movie, it was really, really effective for me.
Yeah.
And then it transitions to them running into going out into the city, beating the shit out of people, and then eventually leading like a rally through the streets to a shorter version of Waiting in the Worms, which I'm not a big fan of because I think some of the melodies that he writes for the beginning of the song are really, really cool. But of course, that gives us the Marching Hammers animation, which is so simple and so effective.
Yeah, it's fun to look at, and they really get their mileage out of it in a way that I don't think is like bad. It's just like they give you a lot of time to sit with that visual, and it works. It's very effective.
Yeah,
and it's fun to look at, and then from there it goes into like the three little interstitial songs that are all kind of mashed together for the movie version, Stop and the other.
Yeah, it's him reciting Stop, and there's a couple other songs that he recites that I can't really hear.
Right, yeah. But he's in like a bathroom stall. We've broken out of the hallucination. And then like from there we basically go straight into the trial. He's like broken out of the one hallucination and it's like immediately into another one. And then like the trial happens, which is like my favorite part of the movie, probably.
It's fucking rad. It's so rad.
It's probably my favorite part of the movie. Have you ever seen Monty Python's Flying Circus?
No, but I know what you're going to talk about.
Okay, yeah.
It's
like this
Terry Gilliam's animation.
This it feels very pointed and intentional. Like it feels like it's referencing, because Monty Python's Flying Circus predated this, and it feels like it is like referential to Monty Python's Flying Circus stuff, where it's like every character has like fucking butt cheeks or titties, and it's like rude and irreverent and silly and grotesque and ugly, and it's just like so much fun to look at.
Yeah.
I think it's like such a arresting sequence visually. Also, probably hot take, The Trial is one of my favorite songs on the album. Like, Comfortably Numb is like a way better song, but like I severely fuck with The Trial as a piece of music. I just think it's very fun and weird and off the wall and creative and good.
I think songs like Mother and Hey You, Nobody Home, and Comfortably Numb, those are probably the big ones.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that work for me outside the context to the album. So
Yeah.
those are probably my favorite songs. I think Mother might be my favorite song on the album, actually.
I'm not gonna lie, I sometimes listen to The Trial when I'm not listening to the whole album.
And I don't. But
Yeah,
what I'll
I
say
sometimes do.
is the rally sequence on the album, basically, the show must go on through the trial. Show must go on, which isn't in the movie, but I don't necessarily miss it. That run of songs might be my favorite run of songs on the album.
Yeah.
And you get to the trial, and it's like, oh boy, we got to the trial.
Yeah.
It's the big reward.
Yeah.
It's a testament to how strong this Gerald Scarfe animation is. That when I saw Roger Waters play the wall, he had tons of new animation sequences and moments for the other songs on the album. When it got to the trial, he just played the trial on the wall.
Yes.
And sang it on a microphone, sort of in the corner of the stage.
Yeah.
And just let Gerald Scarfe's animation speak for itself.
Yeah, it's very effective. Now, there are a couple things in here that are like, again, not my favorite, which is mostly like the female characters just constantly metamorphosing into vaginas and uteruses.
I do like the mom morphing back and forth between like a fighter plane.
A fighter plane that turns into a uterus that then turns into a fighter plane again and then turns into a giant vulva.
Yes. Yeah, that's fun.
It is fun visually, but at the same time, I'm like, I understand we're commentating on misogyny. It also sometimes feels like the commentating on misogyny veers into performing misogyny at points in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this, and then like the wife showing up and her basically being like an evil vagina praying mantis monster. I'm like, okay, like, I get it. This is his perception of women, but also we're leaning so hard into, like, the yonic imagery, like, the vulvic imagery, that I'm like, I can't really tell what of this is supposed to be, like, us critiquing Pink's view of women, and how much of this I'm supposed to just take exception to as a viewer.
I do like when she picks up the pink doll and like
Wears
stretches
him
him
like a
out into a
scarf.
scarf. That's fun.
Yeah. Yes, I love all that shit. I also really, really like the chorus of the trial sequences where it like zooms in on Pink's like fucking blank harrowed stare and does it while it's the crazy over the rainbow, like those whole sequences, and him like turning into a leaf and then back into a little body. It's like that shit is all very good.
Yeah.
Also, Roger Waters, They Must Have Taken My Marbles Away is one of my favorite vocal deliveries of his on the entire album. I love the way he sings that line. It's like very like, it just sounds like he's like stretched to the end of his rope.
Oh, I like that, but I also like when he goes, there must have been a door there in the wall from when I came in.
Ooh.
So good.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
And the judge is the giant ass.
The judge is a giant penis with balls on his chin that then turns into a giant ass.
It's a worm that then turns into an ass.
It's a worm
with balls
that
on his
turns
chin.
into a penis because
Yeah.
his head with his judge wig is very much shaped like the head of a penis, and he turns from a worm into like this penis head thing. So it's like, well, he's a cock with balls as a chin, but then he grows legs and is a giant ass with balls as a chin, and his mouth is a butthole.
It's fucking rad.
And he's filled with the urge to defecate.
Yeah. It would be funny if he actually did just take a shit on him.
Yeah. Well, he does at the end of the song. He after he says tear down the wall, he vomits, which because his mouth is a butthole, he is just taking a shit all over the screen. Yeah.
Wow, I missed that.
Yeah, he vomits at the end after he says tear down the wall.
I watched this movie twice. Jesus.
He goes like bleh, and it covers the screen in like it's the image of Pink floating in the pool, but then it's also like a bunch of other like visual motifs from the movie, like slide down in this like greenish brownish sludge.
Yeah, that's when I cried, but I somehow missed the shitting part. That's the second time I cried.
It's the judge shitting,
and then the wall explodes.
Yeah.
The physical wall, which I really like the practical wall that they built for the movie.
I agree.
That we don't see a ton.
Yeah.
I love that it's like all these misshapen and bricks that are of different sizes and how shitty it looks.
And
then
it looks very like it looks very I can't think of the word. I was gonna say it looks like a prison wall, but there was an adjective I was gonna use that's escaping me. But yeah, it looks like very much like it is a wall meant for like confinement.
Yeah.
Not for like, you know, privacy or whatever. Like it looks like an ugly utilitarian wall, you know. Yeah.
And then it ends with outside the wall and these kids picking through rubble.
Yeah. There's a couple ways to read this ending, which yeah, because like the kids, the little children picking up the bricks from the wall, you can see as like, well, they're gonna now build their own walls, and the cycle is continuing, and the trauma that Pink has inflicted on society because of his own inner, you know, turmoil and demons is now like infecting the younger generation. Or you can see it as like the younger generation cleaning up after the destruction that has been caused by the people who came before them. And I feel like it's a piece of art that doesn't need one definitive reading. Like it can be both of those things, but I was kind of getting both of those things from the end of the movie.
Yeah. I know for a long time one of the kids there looked like the very young Pink, little fat Pink.
Yes.
And I realized this time that they're two different kids. But at that point, when I thought that, there's a lot in this movie that makes me think of like reverting to childhood and being stuck in a state of arrested development.
Oh yeah.
So that's how I read that too. Outside the Wall has always been kind of vague.
Yeah.
And it's also often been just the credits song for like the live shows, the filmed versions of the live shows, and I'm like, I wish you do a little bit more with it.
It does kind of feel like it isn't given its due in the movie. I agree. Because like the trial is the climax of the story. It's him kind of confronting his own culpability for the pain that he has experienced, right? But Outside the Wall is the actual like coda. Like it is like it's him basically being like, and now I have to like be vulnerable with people, and like that's scary and hard, but I'm gonna do it. And it's like we don't actually see him do it at all. It's just like, and these are all the people who worked on the movie.
Yeah, and I don't need a ton of specificity, but just some more imagery to go along with this and give this like a real denouement for the story.
If he like went to a pub and smiled at a stranger or something while this was playing, I feel like that would be enough.
Yeah.
Like just show him be authentic and sensitive and vulnerable with somebody. And I feel like that's all that you would need as a visual here.
And I really like the alternate versions that when they played in concert or this version where it is more of a song instead of just like Roger Waters doing spoken word over people singing in the background.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit longer. I don't know. Do something with it.
Yeah.
Rather than just play it over the credits.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that's The Wall, Justus.
That is Pink Floyd, The Wall.
As instituted last week, we're alternating verdicts on each episode, so this one goes to you.
Yeah.
Is Alan Parker's 1982 adaptation of Pink Floyd, The Wall, as written by Roger Waters, and also
Floyd's.
David Gilmour a little bit, which Roger likes to forget.
Yeah.
Is it the greatest movie ever made?
David, I had never seen this movie before. It was my first time with it. It's an interesting supplement to the album The Wall. After viewing it, there are definitely some things that stuck with me in a positive way. I do think there are some visuals that sort of like complement the themes of the album nicely at points. Goodbye Blue Sky, like I mentioned before, is a great example of that. Like that's a real highlight where like the visuals sort of enhance the song. That being said, there are also moments where I feel like the visual symbolism kind of just hits me over the head a little bit harder than the subtlety that is like intrinsic to the album, right? And I'm not saying the album's super subtle because it definitely has its moments where it's a little preachy too, but like I feel like sometimes it's compounded in the movie where I'm just like, all right, I fucking get it. Like I got the message, guys. So sort of a mixed bag for me there. That being said, I think this thing is beautiful to look at. You called out the editing. I echo that. I think this movie is very well edited.
I should also mention the cinematography is great.
The cinematography is also great. It's beautiful to look at.
Yeah,
it's a great looking movie, and they do a really good job of, and this is down to the editing, of syncing up the visuals to not just the acoustics, like not just the actual like sound of the music, but also like the emotional beats of the music. They do an immaculate job of that, and there's like lots of like quick cutting and kind of like subliminal like interstitial stills that happen at points that are like very effective at communicating like the more subtle stuff. So yeah, very well made movie, and very interesting as a piece of filmmaking. Like it's definitely more like surrealist than anything we've ever covered before, and I do enjoy weird movies. Like I like sitting down and watching something that isn't necessarily a standard narrative film. That being said, when this movie came out, David Gilmour was asked about it in an interview, and one of the things that he said about this movie is that he thinks that this is the least good version of the story that the album The Wall tells. He was basically like, the record is better and the live show is better than the movie, right? And having seen recordings of the live show of The Wall on tour, and having listened to the album, and now having seen the movie, kind of agree with my boy David Gilmour. I think I liked this movie a lot. I do think it doesn't add anything to the album for me that is indispensable. And in terms of engaging with this story and the themes that Roger Waters is exploring here, kind of think the album does it better on its own than the movie does as like a feature-length music video. So glad I watched it, enjoyed it immensely. Not the greatest movie ever made for me. David, is The Wall the greatest movie ever made?
Justice.
Yeah.
I've had a complicated relationship with this movie.
Yes. It made you afraid.
Traumatizing me as a child. Making me scared of the song Comfortably Numb. I just heard that guitar solo. I was like, oh no, he's changing. No. I've had a complicated relationship with this because a lot of the imagery is very on the nose and hammers you over the head with it. Hey. Didn't mean to do that. It is pretentious and self-indulgent,
yes.
much like The Wall is.
Yeah. A little bit masturbatory, like we said before.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the album and will continue to love the album. I've loved the tours that seeing him live was incredible, and then the videos of the Berlin show and the Roger Waters tour are both great versions of The Wall. What I love about The Wall as an artistic piece is that its meaning has changed over time, and it has changed with each adaptation. I do not think that the film replaces the album in any way. I also don't think it was necessarily trying to, and I think a lot of the visuals from Gerald Scarfe and even the live action stuff enhances my understanding of the album in a interesting way, and in a way that is different than just me sitting and listening to it at home. I think we didn't really talk about him that much because he doesn't have a ton to do other than glare at a TV screen and look sad
and occasionally scream
slurs. I think Bob Geldof does a really, really good job with how limited this performance is.
I agree. I think weirdly also Bob Hoskins is kind of great in this movie, despite the fact that mostly he is miming lines over Pink Floyd songs.
And I think the visuals are incredible. The cinematography is great. The editing is so well choreographed to the music and builds so much more meaning and theme out of this thing. And I watched this twice, and part of it was one morning I was just like, you know what? I think I just need to watch The Wall today. I don't know when we're going to talk about it on the show because our schedules were weird this weekend, but I think I just need to sit down and watch The Wall. And sometimes I just need to engage with this thing and let it wash over me and see what meaning comes out of it. And that meaning changes subtly for me every time. And I think Well, I don't think it automatically earns this because it is adapting the greatest album of all time, greatest album ever made, in my opinion. I kind of think on its own merits, Pink Floyd The Wall might be the greatest movie ever made.
Wow.
It is so singular and bold, and fearless. And I think all of its visual imagery is deployed so well and so specifically, and is so resonant with me personally, that I think this thing's fucking incredible. Behind the album, I think this might be my second favorite adaptation of this story.
Yeah.
And the tours are both great. The live videos of those are really good. And seeing him live was incredible. It's probably the best show I've ever been to. But there's something really special about this movie. And I don't think it is just Roger Waters jerking his dick off on screen. I think there is a great mix of Waters' interpretation of this story, Gerald Scarfe's interpretation, and Alan Parker.
Yeah.
I think we have to acknowledge that, like, Alan Parker putting this thing together and forming this thing into any sort of like coherence, with any sort of coherent meaning or story and narrative and visual motif. I think he did a very good job at this.
Yes, agree. Also can understand why this was not a positive experience in terms of like the actual creation of this project for him, because it does seem like that was really hard to do. But he did a great job. Yeah.
And it's one that I've had a difficult relationship in the past, and there were points where I was just not really that into it and didn't like it. But I didn't know what I was going to say the first time that I watched it recently for this. But by the time I finished it the second time, I was like, yeah, this is getting a yes for me.
Oh, yeah.
That's The Wall.
That is The Wall. Pink Floyd, The Wall. Pink Floyd hyphen The Wall
Yes.
is the official title of this film.
Are
Not
there
a colon, a hyphen. Pink Floyd hyphen The Wall.
Are there any dipshits in the audience tonight? Get them up against the wall. Thank you guys for listening.
We would never put our dipshits against the wall.
Yeah.
Unless it was to give you a medal or a pat on the head.
Yeah. Which we would give to you if you told people about the show and tweeted about it and helped grow our audience.
Yeah.
And recommend it to a friend and recommend it to your mailman. And that would be great. Justus, holy shit, we've been doing this for a year.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for going on 50 episodes.
Yes, next
week's
week's episode is the Big 5-0.
Yeah. So we're gonna do a little sort of vague theme month.
Yeah.
It's TGME anniversary.
TGME anniversary. Episodes 50 through what? Like 53?
We both picked a movie that we really love and a movie that we really dislike.
Correct.
And we're gonna have a little fun with those. Justice, for episode 50,
Mm-hmm.
we are watching one of the most underrated movies I've ever seen. That is also one of my favorites. If you know me personally, I've probably told you to watch this movie, and if you have seen this movie, it's probably because I told you to watch it. It's Craig R. Baxley's 1991 low-budget action movie starring college football star Brian the Bosworth. Stone Cold.
Stone Cold.
No
Also
one's heard of
starring-
this movie unless I've told you about it.
Also starring Lance Henriksen.
Also starring Lance fucking Henriksen. Jesus Christ. So we're going to watch that. And then,
that's going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
We both love this movie.
Yeah, it's really great. It's really fucking good.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to subject you to the Emoji Movie. We're going to watch the Emoji Movie.
Yeah.
I watched the Emoji Movie in theaters. I paid with my hard-earned money
Why?
for a movie ticket to see the Emoji Movie.
Why did you do that? Seems like a bad idea to me.
It was.
Yeah.
And watching it
And now
again
I'm going to have to watch
is going to
it.
be a bad idea. Justice, what have you picked for
TGME anniversary.
TGME anniversary?
So for the week following the Emoji Movie, we will be going back into good movie territory. And David, your picks, both Stone Cold and the Emoji Movie, I feel like are a little bit more like not niche necessarily, but maybe a little bit more like underground sort of like
Yeah.
yeah
The kids
both-
were not clamoring for an Emoji Movie 2.
yeah, like good and bad. Your movies are a little bit more like underdog films.
Mhm.
I'm the people pleaser on this podcast. I'm the person who is always trying to make people pay attention to me and like me. So both of mine are big titles. For the good film, we will be talking about Paul Verhoeven's, I think, seminal masterpiece, RoboCop.
Oh, good.
What if a cop
Fuck, yeah.
was a robot?
I didn't know which one you were going to say.
Yes. Yeah, I said Paul Verhoeven and your face lit up.
I was
you
like,
didn't know which
there's
one.
3 things he could say that I would love to talk about any of them.
I have decided, since it's my good pick for TGM anniversary, that I wanted to pick my favorite Paul Verhoeven movie, which is RoboCop. I also love Total Recall, which I know is your number one.
Yeah, baby.
And I also love Starship Troopers. But RoboCop is a number one for me. RoboCop
Cool.
is the creme de la creme of Verhoeven. for me.
And what's
And
your stinker?
Oh, my stinker? Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard me deride a certain, in my opinion, insanely well-regarded, like overhyped animated film on this podcast before. We will finally be getting into my full feelings on it because we're going to be talking Shrek for some fucking reason on this podcast. A movie that, like, I'm in the minority on thinking is bad, which is insane to me. Like, so many people will be like, no, the first Shrek is good. And I'm like, I thought we were all doing a bit. I thought we were all doing a meme where we all pretended to like Shrek. And then I, like, grew to adulthood and was like, oh, no, people actually look back on it positively. I thought that was a joke we were all doing. Because I think it sucks dog shit. Donkey shit, you might say.
Donkey!
So we're going to be dealing with all that fucking shit after we talk about RoboCop, and I'm going to wish we'd never started this podcast because I'm going to have to fucking watch Shrek.
And the Emoji Movie.
And the Emoji
Forgot about the Emoji
Which-
Movie.
The Emoji Movie will probably be worse, just to be clear, but the Emoji Movie I'm going into, I'm just, like, entering that not even knowing what I'm going to be dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
Shrek, I already am aware of the terrors that are in store, like the torments that will be visited upon me by Shrek, like I've already experienced. So I'm like dreading that one more because I already know how bad it's gonna be. The Emoji Movie, I feel like I'm just like, this could be anything.
Yeah. So I love RoboCop. So I'm excited to watch that and
Yeah.
talk about some Verhoeven. Shrek, I have positive feelings toward, but it has been quite a long time since I saw it.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to revisit that and see if I agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for sticking with us for this last year.
For a year.
It's been fun talking about movies with my friend in his room with microphones.
Yes.
It makes me even happier that people out there actually like hearing us talk about it.
Yes, our small but loyal audience. We love each and every one of you.
Join us next week for episode 50. And as always, goodbye, Crew World, dipshits!
Yeah, yes, later, dipshits. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.
Isn't this where?